Woo! That was a rough one. UCF goes down hard to Texas Tech, but that's what we expected.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G. Turn us on, turn us up. We'll turn it out. I'm here with Andrew Gluco, senior writer at UCFKnightzone.com to talk a little UCF football here on today's post game. The Knights go down to Texas Tech. We're going to talk about why we expected what we saw. And then we're going to talk a little bit about that quarterback position there. Taven Jackson having himself somewhat of a day. So it's very interesting analysis there. And then in the third, I want to talk about how we regroup. Let's start at the top here. UCF goes down to Texas Tech 48-9. Andrew, 230 yards of offense for the Knights to 500 yards, 499. I'm rounding up a yard for Texas.
They kneeled that out. They were over and then they kneeled it out.
Look, UCF penalized 7 times for 45 yards in this one. Texas Tech actually penalized 9 times for 82 yards in this game. The Knights a mere 4 of 13 on third downs, while Texas Tech converted 8 of 13 third downs there. Look, at the end of the day, we knew this was an uphill battle for UCF. We knew this was an uphill battle. But it still hurts to see it. Like, now we understand why the spread was so big. Obviously, Texas Tech covered. If you bet on them to cover, you won some money in this one. Their quarterback, Morton, was 14 of 20 for 149 yards and a touchdown, while Taven Jackson was actually 27 of 33 for 178 yards and a touchdown. That's an 82% completion percentage. He did throw a pick in this one. The run game, unable to get going for UCF in this one. Actually, the run game was non-existent. UCF ran 29 times for 52 yards in this game. Andrew, you can be bad at the things you're bad at. You can't be bad at the things you're supposed to be good at and expect to compete. UCF has a long way to go in this rebuild. I think this was definitely kind of the reckoning, maybe, for UCF. There were a lot of close games against tough, good teams early in the season. This was an absolute destruction by a team that is just much better on paper than UCF is.
I mean, we knew going into this was not going to be a pretty game. Did we expect them to score, in just over a minute in 4 plays, a touchdown? Nah, I didn't think it'd be that fast. UCF seemed a bit shell shock early on, and then partway through the first quarter, they kind of slowed things down before the floodgates opened in the second. I was talking to someone online. I mentioned how UCF normally has a pretty stout first quarter defense. Unfortunately, there's 4 quarters, and second quarter they just got absolutely lit up, and then in the second half, third quarter you still had a lot of starters in before they started full tournament out for Texas Tech. UCF did a pretty good job there, and then by the fourth quarter you had your bench guys. So I mean it didn't surprise me at that point. I have to tip my hat to Joey McGuire. He called the dogs off. He knew there was, at this point, you're not going to gain style points by beating this team to the ground. It was well known how beat up UCF is. I mean, you have multiple starters out. And I mean, everyone already knew that. You have 2 quarterbacks available, that weren't ruled out. Your starting running back ruled out. You have multiple linemen ruled out. And then you just had a lot of guys who were barely playing, like on the defensive side of the ball. Malachi Lawrence actually got in the game. We weren't sure if he was going to play. It was a game time decision. There was no secret at how rough of shape UCF, and that doesn't even count the guys who were already knocked out for the season earlier on. So UCF had a depth problem. They had a starting rotation problem, and Texas Tech right now is the best team money can buy in the Big 12.
It's a $30 million roster.
And I'm not blaming them for it because it's kind of like that 1 year that there's no salary cap before, in the pros, where you can just kind of go roughshod on it, and then next year you kind of have to hit the reset button a little bit. They're taking advantage of the hand that was given to them. They had a financier that was able to help bankroll them, and they took advantage. UCF doesn't have that. UCF doesn't have the oil money or some sort of tycoon or a Fertitta at Houston, someone that can really help bankroll this program, and it shows. And so while this year everything was just kind of complete Wild West on that, it should start to stabilize a little bit more in the ensuing seasons, because a lot of these players were brought in before the house settlement and the revenue programs kicked in July. So this year you kind of have to kind of almost write it off. Next year,
Andrew,
everyone's going to be on that same level. There's only so much you can do, and then there's only so much outside NIL that can be done to kind of shift from one school to the other. So I think next year will be a little bit easier for UCF to hit the portal, do some recruiting, and start filling in holes.
Yeah, only one red zone trip for the Knights here versus,
and they cashed in.
They did cash in. It was, again, just a tough sledding. Now, when we looked at the injury report headed into this one, we review it every Wednesday night. It was bad. And it was any little hope I had that UCF could pull a surprise, anything went out of the window with the injury report. But look, I do want to talk quarterback in this one. There was some talk about whether or not UCF had a little bit of a quarterback controversy headed in this one after what happened at the end of the game. Taven Jackson, again, 27 of 33 for 178 yards and 82% completion percentage. We're going to talk about his day and what it potentially means for the Knights next on Locked On UCF. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at DoorDash, guys. Look, DoorDash is delivering on your Saturdays, every single Saturday. And look, man, nobody from UCF delivered today, but DoorDash delivered for you. So if you wanted some consolation eats this Saturday, DoorDash had you covered. And they do it all season with DoorDash Streaks. You save every Saturday, stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Get your heat on with DoorDash. Taven Jackson, as I mentioned, was the starter in this one. We did see Davi Belfort, though. He didn't throw a pass. He did run a couple of times, but this was Taven Jackson's show here. Now, he didn't show up on the injury report. We know he's been kind of on and off with injuries this season. Talk to me about Taven Jackson. What did you see from him today? And look, headed into next season, you would hope that maybe some guys emerge for you if you're Scott Frost, that you could say, yes, I'm going to continue to build the foundation of this roster with these guys returning and with them a little bit more experienced and well-versed in our system and the way we do things and what the expectations are. Did Taven Jackson at least somewhat today establish himself as a guy that you're like, yes, let's have him come back next year and potentially he's a much better player next year? Or is it, or does UCF need to look elsewhere in 2026 at quarterback?
Well, I mean, you're always looking. You're always looking. You would be foolish not to look. I think you try to keep Jackson around and have him compete. Here's the thing. He actually had a pretty solid game. He took what the defense gave him. He didn't have a lot of time to react, and he had to ad-lib a few plays, and he was beat up in his legs. We knew that. But I think he worked as well as he possibly could. He had a couple of drop passes from his receivers. Aday had one. I'm trying to remember who had the other drop. If it was I think it was Rollerson had a drop, and it was a bad one. But other than really one bad pass ended up getting picked off where he just did not see the open man. I think he had a pretty solid game. I mean, you passed for over 80 yards. I mean, that's impressive. The problem is he just didn't have time to really let things develop. They had to dink and dunk. I thought the play calling in this game might be one of the better games play calling wise. I mean, UCF was just outmatched.
Oh, okay.
Just flat out outmatched. But I thought the play calling was pretty solid. I was not a big fan of Davi Belfort being out there because he's a one-trick pony. And Texas Tech knew when he was on the field, he's going to run or someone's going to run, and you can stack the box. With Jackson, they had to respect the pass, and that worked. That's why Belfort, he was on for a few plays, first couple drives, and then they didn't bring him back. They even thought about, according to Fox, Frost said that he would play in the second half. Other than as necessary. No, they did not go back to that well. And for good reason. Jackson, the second half, was very consistent. He was he was near perfect. He was 14 of 16 for 120 yards and a touchdown in the second half. I mean, that's solid.
Yeah,
and,
it was.
Even if you look at his body as a whole, he was perfect 3 for 3 in the first quarter, but he couldn't move the ball. And then he was 10 of 14 for 51 yards in that one pick. Again, couldn't move the ball. But the second half, they did. And you could say, oh, well, the fourth quarter, they called off the dogs. UCF only threw the ball 3 times in the fourth quarter. They went 12 of 13 for 96 yards in the third, and the starters were still out there for Texas Tech. This was probably one of their better quarters that I've seen as far as just execute what, those things that are given to you. The problem is they just couldn't run the ball and became one-dimensional. They took a few sacks. I mean, that's the risk of having a pass only with no offensive line.
Yeah, look, they had, again, 29 rushes in this one. 29 rushes. Jay Nixon did get 15 carries. We knew Miles Montgomery was going to be out for this one. So, we got to see a young back here. I want to make sure I say his name right. Aday, right? Yeah, he had 4 carries for 30 yards in this one, and I think he caught a pass. He caught a couple passes here. But
he ripped off a 20-yard run. It was really nice.
Yeah. You want to look for small wins in a game like this, where maybe some guys come in and show some flashes. James and I talked about this early once we saw the injury report. We said, hey, is there an opportunity here for some guys to step up and maybe have a real-time audition to say, hey, look, I haven't gotten much play this year, but now that I get a chance to touch the field, let me show you what I can do. We knew Gage had surgery, so he's out. And you were running thin in the backfield, man. It was UCF didn't.
Aday's not even a scholarship runner.
Yeah, I know, man. It was rough out here. I'm not surprised at the result here. I'm absolutely not surprised at the result. But you've got to start to figure some things out if you're Scott Frost about this roster and where you go. As you mentioned, you are always looking to improve. So at quarterback, yes, you're going to go and you're going to try to find a quarterback in the portal this offseason. Even with Kane Archer and Dante Carr coming in, we've got to get used to the idea that you can have more than one guy at the same position that can do the job, and multiple of those guys will stay and compete. So just getting one in the door doesn't mean the other is going to fly out the door immediately. A lot of people are like, oh, if you go get a portal quarterback, Kane Archer is going to go somewhere else. No. Where every high-level program that you go to, there's going to be multiple guys on that roster that can do the job, and you're going to have to compete.
Football players are competitors.
Yeah. You're not going to just write it off just because. But I was hoping that in this one we would see some grit from a few guys. So I did like what I saw from Taven Jackson today. Look, I mean, it didn't amount to much, but that wasn't on Taven Jackson. This team was just overmatched from a talent standpoint, and look, there was no scheming up anything in this one. Not where UCF was at with injuries. They would have needed all hands on deck, and they would have needed to do a rain dance and have a little bit of luck in this one for it to have become a game. Credit to Texas Tech. They came out and they just shut the door immediately and left no hope from the beginning that UCF was going to be able to stun them with a fluky turnover and, all the weird things that happen when you beat a team that you're not supposed to beat, right? Earlier today, for example, I watched South Carolina build a 27-point lead on Texas A&M, and then in the second half, talent just took over. And South Carolina looked like South Carolina in the second half, and they lost that game. And I mean, what an epic collapse! I don't know. I don't know if Shane Beaver has been fired yet, but certainly, I think he should be joining the ranks of the unemployed over there in the SEC. I'm just saying, talent wins, man. Talent wins, and you've got to figure out a way to stack this roster from a talent standpoint. Look, I don't want to spend a bunch of time here today. This was a rough one, and there's not a lot that we can say that we didn't already say about this one. But I do want to talk about how UCF regroups from here. We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCF. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, guys. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with our friends at FanDuel, the official betting partner of the NBA. If you missed the start of the game and you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. You can even combine your bets into a same-game parlay for a chance at an even bigger payout. This is something I love to do. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel customers, new customers, can get $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head on over to FanDuel.com, download the app, and sign up today. FanDuel, the official betting partner of the NBA. How do you regroup? Right, you got Oklahoma State coming in, and obviously that's a game that UCF should win on paper, but right now, with the state of this roster, I can't really rule anything out. That's not a game we can take for granted. If you're Scott Frost, you get 2 more and you get to a bowl game. That's fourth and a long 2.
It's longer than a 2.
Yeah. I thought a couple weeks ago that it might be 4th and inches, 4th and a quarterback sneak, right? But this is like trying to sneak it from the 4-yard line on 4th and goal. Andrew, I don't know if a bowl game is within reach for UCF. I think that it's going to take some luck to beat. It's going to take us a lot of luck to beat BYU at this point. Get Oklahoma State, and you're 1 game better than last year. You got to regroup. But I do want to ask you a question. At 5-7, is year 1 a failure for Scott Frost?
I mean, to me, it sort of is. My view was 6-6, and they could have done it. They dropped the ball more than once. They left 2 games easily on the field in Kansas and Houston. Those are 2 games they should have won and left them hanging. That's on them. Texas Tech, Baylor, and even Kansas State to a lesser extent. Just beat them, and you just kind of have to wipe your hands on that and just say that was just a loss. That wasn't them winning, or that was them winning the game. That wasn't us losing the game. UCF stole defeat from the jaws of victory against Kansas and Houston. They had leads in both of those. They choked them away. So if they can't find a way to do more, it's definitely a failure. You can look at they won 1 more game, but the teams they beat were not good teams. So you're best out of the bad teams. Is that what you're looking for?
Right.
No, you beat Jacksonville State, and yes, I know they're in the hunt for a conference title and everything, but you're also talking about a team that's in the number 9 ranked on the Warren Known ELO, number 9 ranked conference. UCF in the Big 12, that's the 4th ranked conference. So you're looking at a low ranked conference. Sure, they're doing well there, but put them somewhere else and be very different. North Carolina, not a good team. West Virginia, not a good team. You know, you're talking about, winning games against bad, we don't even have to talk about A&T. That, enough said. So yeah, you're winning the games you're supposed to win, but you have to be able to punch up a little bit in order to gain some respect. I mean, that's what Houston and Cincinnati did. No one gave them a chance going into the season, and look at what they've done. Granted, Cincinnati lost this week or today, really, against Arizona. They got in the top 25. Houston cracked the top 25 before dropping to West Virginia. So, I mean, these are teams that definitely, made a jump up, and UCF hasn't. And you can make the excuse, we got all these players. At the end of the game, it's wins and losses, and that's what you're remembered for. And that's what goes into the archives of college football, not the asterisk of, we had to replace 70 players. That's not there. And that'll never be there. That's the thing that goes in, that your fans talk about. But when you look in the history books, nobody cares. You work with what you got, and you do the best you can with what you got. And I think UCF dropped the ball a couple times. I think with some better game management, some better coaching, some better play calling, and just some better luck. Because UCF has some bad luck too. They would easily have 2 to 3 more wins.
Yeah, look, when you're bad, you're unlucky, and when you're good, you seem to get lucky. I like there's an old saying about the harder you work, the luckier you get. UCF has got to get back to the drawing board. They've got to continue to work hard to try to put themselves in a better position to be on the receiving end of some of that luck in the close games. Because I'm telling you, right now, this is not a football team that's close to where Scott Frost wants them to be. But hopefully, from a culture standpoint, they've laid the foundation for what is expected of UCF football players under Scott Frost. And what we see over these last 2 weeks is a disciplined football team that will give themselves every opportunity to win if there is a chance. And, maybe, surprise us here at the end. Again, I don't think that BYU is some unbeatable team. They are better than UCF, but they aren't some juggernaut that I would fear, even if I were an average football team. I think so. You've got to go to their
situation though. For UCF, they have to travel to Provo. It's the end of November. Weather can be a problem in this situation. We don't know yet, but it could be.
It could be. It could be. Look, ultimately, again, they've got to play better. If you're Scott Frost, now's the time where you show what high-level coaching looks like. Regroup your team, beat Oklahoma State, and then put a plan on paper to come out and try to shell-shock BYU early in their stadium. Now, again, I understand that that's an uphill battle. We're living in reality over here at Locked On UCF over these last couple of games. I know there were some people in the comments of the videos that felt like in the aftermath of some of the losses, you and I in particular were maybe too negative or too hard on the guys. But look, man, this is about play on the field. It's not personal. And you got to call out what you see. And ultimately what we see a team that's worked hard to try to win games, but again, they've got a lot that they've got to overcome here, and I'm just hoping that they can overcome it. Andrew Gluco, senior writer, UCFKnightZone.com, joining me here live in the aftermath of what was, I would say, the worst loss of the season for UCF. Would you agree? Like, this was...
it was blowout. It was an expected blowout. I don't think it's the worst loss, because the worst loss is the loss you were supposed to win. It was definitely the most one-sided loss.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. It's really, really going to be interesting to see where they go from here. But either way, we're going to be here to talk about it. I can't wait to see. I'm taking moral victories at this point at the end of the season here. Beat Oklahoma State and give BYU a run for their money, and let's see where UCF lands. I would love to see this team make a bowl game. I would love for them to get the extra practices. I would love for them to get the extra games because Kane Archer is enrolling early, and he can participate in bowl practice if he enrolls early. So yes, it is a big deal, man, to get to a bowl game in a 6-6 season in year one when you're rebuilding. That's extra football that you get to play. That's extra data. That's extra reps. And I'm telling you, for what this coach is trying to rebuild here at UCF, that could be an important stepping stone. But like I said, either way, we'll be here to talk about it. We'll be back at you guys a Monday morning right here on Locked On UCF.